Yum, yum!
Greg here from Pixel Fondue. In this video, I'm going to show you how to do this a little animation here, sort of like a logo reveal for motion graphics. And yeah, it involves a number of different mesh operations and deformers, and you can take it as far as you want to with replicators and some other things. So it's a good video to watch if you do this kind of animation, or if you'd like to mess around with this stuff in MODO. I also show how to do it with a sort of a transparent, these are rendered in Octane, by the way, a transparent material, like sort of a wrap or something like that. It requires a couple extra steps with this transparent material, and I'll go through that as well. So let's jump over to MODO. Now this was just sort of inspired by William Vaughn's quick 60-second how to roll up a mat video in MODO. It's on Pixel Fondue. It's one of the Vaughn's 60s. I'll link to it below. It's like brilliant, and I just sort of am taking it a little bit farther in this one. So first off, I need to start off with a strip, and so I'm just going to call this strip, and then I'm going to activate my my cylinder tool over here. I'm going to make a disk on Y, and so I just want the cap top to be a radial instead of quad grid. And I want the size to be 64. Make sure it's zeroed out, so just 0, Control Alt Enter. Radius 0.5, 0.5, like that. And 64 sides, like I said. Hit Apply, and we have this, right? And then I'm going to, let me just turn on wireframe opacity, maybe a little bit higher, so you can see what's going on here. So then I'm going to just select a couple of these. Alt C for loop slice. Right click and drag, and maybe get I don't know, 16 of these or so. I think I have show indices on. Let me just turn that off real quick. And yeah, so there we go. Looks like sort of a bullseye. And then looking at it from the top, I'm just gonna, let me turn on the grid here. I'm just gonna grab 4 polygons, 2 on each side of X, and just kind of work my way up here. And I'm gonna turn off the grid now, and just sort of get this whole strip here. That weird line going across the screen is an artifact of ambient occlusion. If you ever bump into that, hopefully they'll get that fixed soon in the advanced viewport. So left bracket, invert, delete, delete, go back to perspective view. Now we've got our little pie slice, right? And so we're going to use this to, basically do our effect. And so I'm going to pop open the stack over there. I can close my direct tools. I don't really need those anymore. And I'm going to add a bend deformer, like so. Now make sure you have locators toggled on. You can hit Control 1 and swipe, or hit O, and just under visibility make sure locators are on. And the thing about the bend deformer, which drives me nuts, is if you press C for channel hall, you can just start dragging and bending. There's no indication until it's actually bent to know what direction it's facing. So what I need to do is put this on the Z. But then if you look and see I'm bending it, that's not what I want, right? I want it to bend like up and down. So I need to rotate it 90 degrees. I'm also going to change the length and radius to 0.5 so it matches our, the length of our slice there. And yeah, so what am I doing? 90 degrees on Z, and then test it out here. Whoops, test out the bend effector. And yeah, that's what I want, right? So I'm going to have it curl up quite a bit, and you can see that it's, we're getting a good loop there. If I do it like maybe 600 degrees, let's do 640, just 2 full loops. There we go. But it's overlapping, so we're not quite done. And you'll see what we'll be doing with this bend handle is if I drag it, you can see this effect happening, right? But we don't actually want to start curled and uncurl. We want to start flat and then curl it. So I'm actually going to whip this guy around 180 and Y, and then I'm going to move it this way. And now you can see when I start dragging it from the center here, it's curling back. That's kind of what we want. But we need to get rid of this whole overlappy thing. So let me show you how to do that. Let's put this back at 0. And whoops, at 0. And then let's add a transform effector. So tab, and then transform. We want the transform effector down there at the bottom. As usual, the icons are Warren's icon kit. They're just awesome. Everybody in MODO should get it. And the transform effector, I'm just going to turn off bend for now, right? And so we've got our transform effector handle, and we've got our bend effector handle. I'm actually just going to go over deformers again really quickly, just for people who may be new to MODO. Deformers consist of a number of components, right? And actually we can look at it in the schematic. You can skip this part if you know how they work, but let's look at it in the schematic really quick. So, the bend, we've got our bend here. In fact, I'll just bring my whole strip. I'll just drag it in and we'll take a look at what we've got. We've got bend and then transform. And now in MODO, these things happen in order, right? Starting at the bottom, bend first, transform second. And these deformers consist of a couple of things. One is the influence, which is telling the deformer what it's affecting. In this case, we're affecting the entire mesh, but we can affect a weight map, sort of modulate the effect like a bone, or just a material or a part or a vertex selection set, whatever. It's very flexible. Same thing with the transform influence. Exact same thing, right? And each of these influences also have an effector, which is just a locator. The bend effector is our little orange bendy thing right here, and then the transform effector is just this little locator right here. So I'm actually gonna, just so you can see these better, I'm gonna change the color of both of these guys. Let's make it sort of purple, so I think that shows up a little bit better. And then I'll make our transform effector a little bit bigger. And so I often use Materia's quick locators for this. It's awesome. So I'm just going to do like a circle, make sure it's on X, and then not like a purple, but not filled in, and maybe like a 0.01 or something in size. Actually, I should make it green, and maybe 0.04, so that I can see it there. Instead of the little plus, I've got a circle, which is a little bit nicer to use. And it's the same thing. It's just this controls the amount of deformation. In this case, if I move it up and down, I'm moving all those entire mesh that's defined here. Now, any deformer can be modulated with a fall off. So in this case, I'm going to add a fall off, and I can add one to the schematic and plug it in, or I could just add it here in the stack. Just two different ways of viewing the same stuff. And I can add a linear fall off, and you can see this yellow thing in here. I'm actually going to make it, again, I'm going to change the color to something just more visible in my viewport, but there it is, right? And so on the sort of thick end of the fall off, only make it 0.5 meters to match up to everything, is going to get the most effect, right? Anything to the right of this side is going to get 100% of the effect. Anything to the left of this pointy end is going to get nothing, and it just modulates in between, right? And you can adjust that with easing curves down here. So again, like I know people who use MODO already know this, but this may be a first time for a lot of people. So I'm just going over how deformers work. So if I go back and I grab my transform effector and I want to transform my little slice here, see how the fall off is affecting that. So lastly, like I said, these happen in order. So starting with the bottom, so bend and then transform. What I want to do is swap the order, and that's just as easy as dragging and dropping. Just put bend on top of transform, and now the transform will happen first and then the bend. And so I'm going to take my fall off here, I'm going to parent it to the bend effector like that, and I'm going to take my transform effector, and you can see it's up just a little bit. So if I look at the side, it's just, I'll go to wireframe. Well, I don't know if it's easy to tell, but it's just pointing, it's just up a little bit at the tip, right? It's sort of like a little ramp there. And what I'm going to do is take my my fall off, and I'm going to move it all the way off. I'm going to move it this way, 0.5, and so it's not affecting it at all. And when I move my bend effector, because it's parented, when I move my bend effector, I can just say that now, it's going to curl and transform at the same time, right? So now you can see the curl isn't overlapping itself. If I turn off, I just turn this little eyeball off here, you'll see we have that overlappy stuff. If I turn it back on, it's fixed, right? If I turn off the bend, you'll see that there's just a slight ramp down the side here. So as it's curling, it's lifting a little, and we're getting rid of that overlapping there. So that's just how the effect works, right? That's the whole beauty of the effect. So I've made some keyframes here. Let me just delete that 1 and 0. So 1, we've got our bend effector at at 0, and at 100, I've got it at 0.5, and yeah, there we go. So we have this down. Now, what do we do to make our full radial slice? And there's a couple of things we can do here. Let me just pull this back down. And so I'm just going to show you a number of ways to approach this. One is just you can just do like a radial array. So I just do radial array, and I can turn that to 16. So remember we had 64 sides, but we just ended up keeping 4. But if we multiply that 16 times, those 4 slices go back to 64, so we get the full circle there, like that. And then if I drag, we've got it all going at once now. And in fact, let me just go ahead and turn on double-sided polygons in the viewport so it looks a little bit nicer. Just double-sided there. Oh, okay. The ambient occlusion doesn't like the double-sided. That's okay. We're going to add some thickness to it anyway, but let me just turn that back off. Yeah, so, but they're all going at the same time, right? That's not necessarily what we want, everything going at the same time. We want to offset them, and there's no way to do that with radial array. So there's a couple of different ways to approach this. So I'm going to delete radial array, and we just have our slice here. And I'm going to add, I'll just add a little thicken on top of this, like that, and just click and drag a little bit. So, you know, now we curl, still not overlapping, looks good, okay. So let's do another approach. Let's do a replicator. So I'm going to add a replicator to the scene here. Add item, replicator, and I'm also going to add a particle generator. And this is going to create an array, a radial array of particles that we're going to replicate our pie slice on. So a particle generator, you can set to radial, and same thing, we want to count as 16. And then our replicator is going to use the prototype, and we're going to use a strip, and for the point source, we're going to use the particle generator. And let me just pull out. You can see we got something there, but it's not quite right. So you'll notice the particle generator has a radius of 1. In fact, if I just slice that, swipe it with the left mouse, I can turn on channel haul and drag that. You can see if I go down to 0, that's what I want, right? So I don't want any offset on there. I just want to go down to 0. And then I want to hide my original strip here. And so I can hide all the locators, and now we've got the same thing happening but with a replicator. And one of the cool things, let me just sort of drag through and one of the cool things about a replicator is you can offset the time of each replica, the animation of each replica, with a parameter down here in the actual replicator. And that parameter is called, down at the bottom, random time variation. And this works in frames. So if I add like 15 and drag through, you'll see nothing is happening in the viewport. And you think, okay, it's not working. And the unfortunate fact is this only happens at render time. So I pop open a window over here and hit play and just kind of go over the top here. You'll notice that in the render window, they're all kind of at different states, right? And if I increase this to like 30, it's even, it's even farther, there's even more of a variation there. And you can, you should be able to change the seed or whatever as well, I believe. Can you change the seed? Will that change the, yeah, you can change the seed. It'll change, if you just want to screw around with it a little bit, you can change the seed and get different patterns there. So that'll work if you're using a replicator and you're rendering in MODO. But if you're rendering in Octane, like I like to do, it's not going to work. Octane is not going to pick this up. So we need to do something else to make this work in Octane. So that's what this second section here is going to be about, making this sort of work in Octane. And with that, I'm going to turn off my thicken here. I'm going to turn off my replicator and particle generator, turn my strip back on. I can hide this. And so we're just back to our regular strip here, right? Boom, boom, boom. Very easy. And what I'm going to do is just select it, and I'm going to, let me just call it strip solo, like that. I'm just changing the name because I already have a MDD saved of this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to save out an MDD, or a motion, it's basically a point cache, right? So it's like a lembic, but it's a little bit easier to deal with because there's a good MDD deformer in MODO. So I just go to animation, and down at the bottom it says export MDD. And I want to go from like 1 to 100. That's where my animation is. Now, the annoying thing about this is, like, I changed the name of the mesh item. It doesn't like let you name the file. It just calls it, pick a folder, and it just calls it whatever the mesh item is, .mdd. And I already had one in there called strip when I first tested this, so that's why I changed the name. So I'm going to hit OK, and it's going to put me in a folder. And I'm going to say MODO experiment, select folder, and then it's just going to export it. Okay, it goes really fast. And so then I'm going to just double click, copy those polygons, Control C, in for a new mesh item, Control V, call this strip B, MDD. We'll just do that. And I'm going to turn off my original strip. And I could hide all these locators as well. And then I'm going to come over here. I'm going to add an operator. I'm going to do the MDD deformer. So I go to MDD. There it is. MDD influence. Double click it. And it's going to ask for a file. And so we are going to go back to where I saved it. Select it. Hit OK. And now it's loaded in. Now a couple of things. Like we saved 1 to 100, but it's starting 0 to 98. I think it defaults at 0, starting at 0. Why it saves 1 frame less than we told it, I don't know. But I'm just turning it back to 1 to 100 for both the start frame and start time. So this is a little bit different. This is like what frame it's going to start on and the time it's going to start on in the MDD, right? So this is the time of the scene for the MDD animation. Timing the scene to start for the MDD animation. So if I say that's like 30, the animation won't start until frame 30, and then it's going to go. And if I set it back to 1, it's going to start right away. And then this one is just the start and end frame of the actual MDD animation. So we just want the full 1 to 100 in there. So there we go. Now we have this, right? And so what do we do with it to get that sort of curliness? First thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to rotate it 90 degrees so it's sort of facing Z like that, like a target board, like a dartboard, so to speak. And then I can select it and over here and make sure you're in item mode, right? So I'm in item mode right now. And I'm going to go to duplicate tab, and these tools work on items as well as components. So what I want to do is do radial array. And I want to click on hierarchy because I want to duplicate the mesh and also the MDD deformer. And I want it to be on Z, and I want 16 duplicates, and I'm going to hit apply. And there we go. So 16 again, to get that perfect arc because we just have that little slice of 4 there. And you'll see them all right here, right? So I can just start turning them off, turning them on. What it does is actually makes 15 duplicates and keeps the original. So there's our original, and then there's 15 more after that. But that's what we want. And then we can go in here and I can individually adjust these MDD start times, like I showed you earlier, to get those offsets. And then this will render in Octane, right? So I may go to this last one here and say start time. I can bring it up to like 13, and then we just sort of drag forward. You can see it's lagging behind, right? So this one, so I'm just going to go through and add like a number between like 1 and 13 between all of these. I wish there was a bit of like an easier way to do this. Like it'd be nice to have some sort of script just to like grab. They'll just take whatever channels are selected, then enter like a random integer between 1 and 15 or whatever. There might be something like that in existence, but in the meantime, I'm just going to brute force it. And you can sort of art direct this a little bit. You can just sort of like drag these, like, where do I want that one, and where do I want this one? Maybe up a little more, and then this one I'm going to want back a little more, that kind of thing. So we're just kind of going through these real quick and just get them all a little bit randomized, right? You can actually probably grab multiple ones, select it, and then put channel hall, and then just click and drag up here. That's what I should have done. Should have just grabbed all of these guys. Let me just do that right now, just so you can see that you can do this. So you just grab all of these guys. You can also make a key set of these, but then press C, and then now I can just go in here and just drag on each one of these individually to get it the way I want it to look. I think that's right. That's pretty good. Okay, so a couple things. We can now you notice like they're not thickened, right? They're also a little bit chunky. So there's a couple things we can do here. What I'm going to do, instead of adding a thicken to each one of these and a subdivide, I'm just going to group all these together. We'll call these strips MDD group. And I'm going to hide it. And then I'm going to do a new mesh. I'm going to call it merged strips. And then I'm going to do a merge mesh, obviously. I'm going to merge all these together, and then I'm just going to do one operation on them. So do my merge meshes, and then I'm going to pick those guys from the merge meshes. Whoops, double click. And for sources, click add sources. Make sure you click existing. And I'm just going to get my strip B MDD, just shift click all 16 and drag them into add source like that. You can see they've been merged in there, and it just keeps all that animation, right? It's also, it's still really fast. Like, it'll still play, real time basically. So it's pretty nice setup. And then I can just add a thicken on top of this, right? So I can just go here and say thicken like this, and just drag it one way or the other. Make it a little bit thick like that. And they're also a little bit chunky. So let me turn off thicken and add a subdivide. Now it defaults to Catmull Clark, right? And you can see that gives that sort of sub D effect on the edges there. And that's not what we want. We want them to stay, 90-degree angles. But you can change that to smooth, and it does exactly what we want. It smooths these in here. You can see if I turn subdivide off and then back on, way smoother. In fact, I'm just going to Control D duplicate it, get another one, so way smoother. And then I'm just going to drag them both under thicken, and then I'm going to thicken them. Boom, like that. So now we've got fairly thick curls going on here, right? Let me just turn off the wireframe opacity. Actually, yeah, go here and I'll just make it a little less. Turn that down a little bit. And yeah, anyway, so we're just dragging through here, and it's obviously going to be a little bit slower now, but we're getting what we want, right? That kind of effect. And this will render in Octane, no problem. So if you're rendering in MODO, just using the offset on the replicator is going to get you what you want faster. But this sort of workaround is nice in Octane. Let's just fire up Octane real quick and take a look at it. And so actually, let me make a logo behind it really fast. So I'm just in for a new mesh. We'll call this, we'll just call it logo, and then go back to your cylinder, make sure it's on Z, and then we'll just make sort of the same sort of disk here, 0, radius 0.5, 0.5, whoops, 0.50, and then, yeah, single polygon's fine. 64 sides is fine. Hit apply, and there it is. And then select that guy. We'll just call this logo for the material and make it sort of red just so we can see it a little bit better. And then select it and move it, that polygon, back behind your, even press R for scale and make it a little bit smaller. But there you can kind of see what's happening, right? And let's take a look at it in Octane real fast. So I'm going to pop open a viewport on this side, right here. And then I'm going to, Octane needs a OpenGL viewport open to get the normal information, it seems. So pop open Octane here, and then fire it up by hitting the play button. And you'll see that when we're using just a solid material or an opaque material, looks pretty good, right? Look through the camera here. Like, you can't see, there's a seam here, right? Between these, between these polygons, there's a seam. Let me turn off indices here. Just select them and then zoom in a little bit, right? These side polygons exist there, but you can't see them, so it works fine. In fact, let me just make sure all my deformers are on. Let me just turn on subdivide so it looks a little bit smoother. Yeah, so it looks really good. But if I go in here and I change the material, so it's just the base material right now, so I'll just adjust that. Transparency maybe 45. And yeah, we'll just make it sort of... Now if I zoom in here a little bit on the camera, you can see this, when it's transparent, you can see the seam, right? Just rough it up a little bit here. You can see that sort of line right there. And so we can actually get rid of it. It's not the perfect solution. If you play it slow, you can see a little bit of popping, but you can fix that with a merge vertex, right? So let me turn all these off. And then I'm going to add a vertex merge right here. And then just drag it right above merge meshes. And then distance will go really small, like 0.5 millimeter. And then we can subdivide and thicken. Let's turn all that stuff back on. And you'll see like here, and these are now merged, right? And you don't see the seam there. If I turn off that back off, you're going to see, and it's probably hard to see on YouTube, but you'll see that seam reappear. Anyway, the whole point is you're just using mesh ops and order of operation to sort of get what you want. So now if you want to go ahead and finish up and put a logo on there, I can load up my Pixel Fondue logo. There we go, and I'll throw it into my logo here. All right. Now you'll notice I need to resize the UV map just a little bit, so I'm just gonna pop over to UV, and I'm going to grab my logo here, and if I don't want to see the UVs of other inactive meshes, I turn off show inactive UVs, and then I can just scale this up a little bit, and that's going to squish my, I'm gonna just reset this in here. It's going to squish my logo down, theoretically, if it is in fact UV mapped. Are we UV mapped here? Cubic mapped. Want to be UV mapped. If you drag an image onto into a material, you might need to have the UV map selected for it to default to UV map. Otherwise, it's going to default to cubic. But yeah, so we want UV, and we want it to be on the texture UV. And I actually want to rotate this guy a little bit there, about 180 degrees. And then again, I want to just sort of scale it up, and then I'm going to turn off repeat. Octane will see that, just turn it to edge. And there we go. All right, Pixel Fondue in the house. Let's go back to my camera view. Then you can go in and animate the camera and set a target or whatever you want to do, and just get something that looks cool. And again, thanks to William Vaughn for his cool little 60-second video that sort of inspired this.
Yum, yum!